and welcome to Overlanders Then and Now. I'm your host, Tom Bingle, and I'm joined by my co host, Jim King. Good day, Jim.
Hi, Binks. Yeah, it's always a good day when we can reminisce on our travels. And, that's a good thing since who knows how much longer we'll be able to remember what happened way back then.
Very good point, Doc. And now that you mention it, I recall something once you said about why you decided to go backpacking overseas.
Oh, yeah. I think it's something along the lines of
Yeah,
when I'm in my
yeah.
rocking chair at 65, I want to look back on my life and see something interesting.
Jim, I won't remind you that you're several years past 65,
Yeah, thank you.
but I think you and I accomplished that goal. All right. So, what interesting thing are we going to look back on today?
Stockholm to Oslo. You
Hmm.
know, It's funny, even saying that reminds me of
Yeah.
sitting at the kitchen table with my brothers and sisters back in Lakewood, Ohio, when we were kids, quizzing each other on the capitals of the world. And the city seemed so, far away, so exotic and
Yeah.
unattainable. And here we were making our way from the
Yeah.
capital of England to the capital of Denmark and capital of Sweden. And now we're on our way to the capital of Norway. So anyway, before we talk about the capital,
Yeah.
Oslo, any final thoughts on Stockholm, Binks?
Jimmy, the one thing, it was certainly a contrast
Hmm.
that between that modern, functional, kind of late 70s, very efficient, cold, high-rise apartments, glass architecture,
Hmm.
the Hortegat and also Fasta. That contrasted so much, Jimmy, that modern edge, quote unquote, to the warm and historic charm of the Gamla Stan. And even more so with the iconic, hard, realistic world of the backpackers on board the Op
Oh,
Chapman, who had some influence on us, those backpackers.
oh, they definitely did. They changed our entire plan, in fact, and for the better, I should add. But I, I don't know, it seems petty, but did you notice, as several of them were telling us how crazy we were not to go to Norway, that there was kind of a backpacker upmanship thing going on?
Oh, Jimmy,
Notice that?
definitely that backpacker brag that
Hmm.
seemed to happen whenever we got together with fellow travelers.
Yeah.
They were eager to establish themselves as true overlanders and opposed to the tourists. And it became quiet competition to see who had traveled to the most places, knew all the things you should see or skip, and do it all without spending much money, Jimmy.
Yeah, sometimes those little games weren't so quiet, right? I remember,
Yeah,
when travel, they would always talk about how to travel as cheaply as possible,
yeah.
and it got
Hmm.
kind of comical. I remember one guy when we said we were going to Amsterdam, he spoke up, really loudly and said something like, Amsterdam. Well, you have to go to the Heineken brewery, but do it in the morning. It's free and you can get a buzz on by noon.
I don't remember that exactly, but it's definitely something you'll hear whenever backpackers get together
Yeah.
and swap stories. But we were still pretty new, Jim, to the game. So we
Hmm.
listened carefully when one of them told us, hey, we're crazy to skip Norway. And he was so adamant about it. We listened.
Hmm.
And it's good that we did. Otherwise, we really would have missed, Jim, some of the most spectacular scenery in all of Europe.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. So, what's the lesson here, Banks, since we're in reflection mode?
Well, Jimmy, reflect flexibility. We
Yeah.
had, we did have solid plans in place, right down to how many places we were going to go and visit, Doc. Okay, how
Hmm.
much time we're going to spend there, and even how much we could spend without running out of money. So I was a little worried, making such a huge change. But what a difference it made. I'm glad we learned that lesson so early, Doc, in our travels. And I guess, definitely, Jimmy, flexibility, you could call that a lesson for work and life in general. Be flexible. What about you, Doc?
Well, I agree about being flexible, especially when you travel. That's critical.
Yes.
And you mentioned the
Yeah.
money situation. I remember being very worried about
Yeah.
that since Scandinavia was and still is so expensive. I was afraid of blowing the budget and having to return home early with my tail between my legs because I was
Yeah.
bragging that I was going to
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Europe for 2 months. You know, but anyway, despite his almost condescending
Yeah. Yeah.
tone,
Yeah.
I'm glad, as you point out, that we listened to that guy. Um, so the lesson. I've tried to
Hmm.
carry forward is to be open,
Okay.
separating
Yeah.
the message from the messenger, because
Yeah.
sometimes even people who really get on your nerves have information and ideas worth hearing about and acting on.
Yeah. Exactly, Jim.
You know.
Yeah.
So anyway, Binks, back to
Yeah.
our trip from Stockholm to Oslo.
Yeah.
Any impressions that have stayed with you after all these years?
Jimmy, I remember slowly as we, move into the Swedish country, starting to get a different feeling, something that I
Yeah.
hadn't experienced, especially now as we got into Norway, about the predominance, one things of these country farms, so bucolic, and always accompanied by a barn painted red. These gentle red farmhouses, Jimmy, continued right up to the outskirts of Oslo. No wonder red is part of the Norwegian flag, Jim.
Yes, yes. And despite the rain, the view of the countryside
Yeah,
was, as we made our way, was truly beautiful. As you say, tidy,
yeah.
family-sized farms instead of these huge industrialized size farms. Um, I do remember seeing kind of off in the
Interesting.
distance an
Yeah.
old guy slowly making his way up a winding path toward a small house next to one of those red barns you just mentioned. And I don't know,
Hmm.
it just kind of symbolized what I thought was a slower, less stressful way of life.
Hmm.
But,
Hmm.
then my cynical nature kicked in, and I thought that poor old guy must be freezing his butt off during the Norwegian winters. Wishes he was in Miami.
Well,
Yeah.
for a different perspective, Jimmy, I also remember talking with a young man, a Norwegian, sitting with us on the train and talking about Norway kind of versus America.
Hmm.
I don't even know if he'd ever been to America, but through video or whatever, he seemed to know a lot about how so many Americans seem to chase the almighty dollar.
Yeah.
He told us that he was perfectly content to finish school, just what was required, not anything beyond, get married and enjoy the life of a Norwegian farmer.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. And definitely
Yep.
a bit of an eye opener because you and I were raised in the city, well, in my case, the burbs. And most of the people we went to high school and went to college with, their goal was, you know, our goal back then was a nice, cushy, white collar job. So, and even though we grew up in Ohio, not all that far from farmland, that lifestyle was kind of foreign to us, at least to me. What about you?
Jim, believe it or not, my father grew up on a farm in Rising Sun, Ohio, outside of
Rising sun.
Rising Sun, Ohio. Then he moved to the big city, Toledo. So I do
Hmm.
have some connection to that land. Um,
Wow, I never knew that about your dad. And
yeah, yeah, Jim,
where the heck is
fascinating.
Rising Sun? I never heard
It's
of it.
near the metropolis of Fremont,
Ah, okay,
close by. So about 30 miles outside of Toledo. Jim,
gotcha.
and the well manicured farms of Sweden and Norway, as we made our way to Oslo, oh, excuse me, Oslo,
Uslo.
made that lifestyle seem more in line with the beauty of those countries. Jim, the landscape, the lakes, the mountains, the small and colorful villages just really exerted a new influence on my life.
How so? What new influence? What do you mean?
Jimmy, maybe this sounds corny, um, little bit of Rocky Mountain High, but the power of nature kind of took over my spirit. It was what we called in previous videos a moment of nirvana. I felt humbled, and it's something that has stayed with me, whether, Jimmy, I'm on a walk in a city park or back out in rural America, this really good feeling about being surrounded by the simple yet extremely complex world of nature. I think this feeling is what influenced my decision years later to move to Colorado, where I still often visit. And Jimmy, I love that 70s expression, usually associated with recreational chemicals, that I felt when I'm in nature. It's such a buzz.
Well, we weren't buzzed on that train, but anyway, suddenly we're in another city, Oslo. So was that a buzz kill for you after all
Oh,
that
Jimmy,
nature?
a little.
Hmm.
It was so special. I was so wrapped up in this immersion of nature that I had not experienced before. I think I was starting to come around to your preference
Hmm.
for seeing the countryside versus, rushing around in cities. And ironically, Jim, I think you were changing your perspective on cities.
Yep. guilty as charged. I really liked Oslo. It was less crowded, slower pace. And I remember you saying when we got there that we weren't going to do a quote unquote number on Oslo.
Jimmy, as we wrote in the blog, that's tourist jargon, doing a number for really analyzing the city in depth,
Hmm.
seeing all the essential sites. Get the book out, the Let's Go Europe, and see, 20 different things if we can. I think we both enjoyed the calmer vibe of Oslo. We did not rush around, but adopted a slower pace and only visited a few sites
Hmm.
and spent quality time on each of those sites. But I want to ask you, interesting, Jim, about your journal entry about the woman we met at
Oh.
Coach's Pension,
Hmm.
Miss Lowe. It seemed that it made an impression, Doc.
Oh yeah, it made a definite impression on me. She had had a rough life. Even at what was she, 30 or something, just 10 years
Hmm.
or so older than us. And it seemed that travel for her, based on her stories, became a way of escaping difficult relationships. And after a while, she said she really wasn't traveling anymore. She was just wandering. And that distinction, traveling versus wandering, really stuck with me. I remember thinking that if I got to the point
Yeah,
where I was no longer traveling, but just wandering,
good one.
it would be time to go home. You know, I mean, fortunately, I would be able to do that, but it seemed like Lowe didn't
Yeah,
really have
yeah.
a home to go to.
Mm-mm. Nope,
I mean, she
no.
was funny, upbeat,
Yeah,
but there was an underlying sadness to her stories. I
yeah,
really
yeah.
kind of felt sorry for her, and I hope she found a home
Yeah,
eventually.
yeah, Jimmy. Right, man. Right on. And on the other end of the spectrum, Jimmy, then we met another backpacker. I wish I could remember her name, but she was around 30
Yep.
and had been on the road for a long time. She told us that she had the feeling that life and time had moved too quickly and wanted to experience more. So while Miss Lowe viewed the road as a means to kind of get away from life, Jimmy, this other backpacker seemed to want to dive into it deeper. And I think that's what we were trying to do, explore life in more depth and searching for deeper meaning.
That was our goal, deeper meaning. So should we take a moment to pat ourselves on the back?
Oh, not yet, not yet. Jimmy, maybe after we talk about the
Ah,
fjords,
good.
where nature really, Jimmy, asserts its power.
Okay. Well, let's tackle that in the next blog and video.
Okay.
All right. So thanks to everyone for watching and
Yeah.
hope you
Thank you.
enjoyed it. And until next time, Skål, everyone.
Score, everyone.
Ooh, little accent there, Binks. Nice.